Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Healthy Waves, the live group podcast where we dive deep into the sea of topics with the experts who bring their wealth of knowledge and insights to our discussions. I'm your host, Avik, and together we will explore the nuances of the mental and the physical well being, and also at the same time uncover the new perspectives and provide the practical advice to help you lead a healthier and more fulfilling life. But before we delve deep into the topic, because today's topic is very great, where we'll be talking about from shadows to the serenity, like harnessing the power of your mind to overcome the addiction, trauma, chronic illness, and others. But before we do that, I'd quickly love to introduce you to all of our guests. So we'll start with Dave Mori. Dear listeners, Dave lives with the bipolar disorder and is a beacon of hope and the humor for many. So, as the best-selling author of the OMG, That's Me, mental health books, and stand-up comic, he teaches others with the mental illness how to find humor in the darkest days. So his journey from hospitalization and homelessness uh, to becoming a transformative figure in the mental health is nothing sort of inspiring. So through his work, Dave shatters the stigma, shares laughter, and offers a message of resilience and the recovery. So welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you.
Lovely. So we'll quickly also introduce you to our next guest, Michael Martin. Like following a series of life-changing events, Michael nature. turned to nature to find that inner peace and heal himself. So after a difficult divorce, he embarked on a solo backpacking trip that led him to reconnect with the tranquility and the resilience of the natural world. So, his journey of the self discovery and the emotional healing in the wilderness has given him a renewed sense of peace and the purpose, which he now shares to inspire others. Also, we have on the other hand, we have Len May. He is a pioneer in the medical cannabis industry and the CEO and the co-founder of EndoDNA. With over 25 years of experience, Len has shaped the legislation and culture around the cannabis, and his expertise in genomics and into the system has revolutionized the personalized health and the wellness. His mission is to educate and empower the individuals through the healing powers of cannabis and the personalized medicine. So, welcome to the show, Len and Michael.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you.
Appreciate it.
Lovely, lovely. So, to start with, I'll quickly start with Martin. Uh, so, so, uh, Michael, to start with, how do how did your solo backpacking trip into the wilderness contribute to your emotional and the mental healing after the phase you've been through? Uh, and what lessons did you learn during that journey?
So I think overall, through that journey, I rediscovered something that somebody took away from me, which was my sense of self worth, my sense of self value. And it expanded and really took shape once I learned to embrace the idea of meditation. And once I started working that into my practices, sitting in the wilderness, learning how to befriend myself and befriend the different emotions that I was struggling with, I started to gain a sense of balance and a sense of inner peace. And that journey, it's taught me to not only rely on the skill set that I've learned throughout life, but it's also taught me to be open to the different examples that I encounter within the living world around me.
Okay, okay. Okay, thanks for sharing this, Michael. I'll come to Dave. Exploring the humor in the healing. If you can share with us, like how the humor became a pivotal tool in your recovery journey, and also at the same time how it can transform the lives of those with the mental illness?
Um, I had
So,
a breakdown in 1996, and from 96 to 2010 were my lost years, my dark days, suffering in silence, just hiding from everyone. And then in 2010, I took a stand-up comedy class for folks with mental illness, and it changed my life. Instead of me having the thought and about a past trauma and reliving that experience, I started to look for the humor in those triggers, those things that would trigger those memories and take me to those darkest places. And once I started doing that, it changed everything. I when the trigger happened, I no longer went to those dark places. I looked for the humor in it. And like Lynn was talking, Lynn's talking about cannabis. And I have a cannabis joke. When when cannabis was legalized in Oregon, we got a new airline. It's called Air Cannabis. And they don't charge you by how far you go, but by how high you get. So
Lovely.
it does a couple things. One, it made a huge difference in my life, and then I teach stand-up comedy to others, and I see the same transformation in them. And I'll be able to talk a little bit about that. But it also helps shatter the stigma. When people find out I'm bipolar, they tend to back away and actually run away as fast as they can. But by including some humor, it humanizes me. It makes it so it's less scary and helps shatter the stigma.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing. Yeah. So I'll come to Len. So after that joke, definitely. So so regarding that personalized health through the genomics, uh, if you can share, I mean, how endo-DNA's technology harness the power of DNA to provide that personalized health recommendations, and how this can be beneficial for the individuals who are dealing with the chronic illness.
Yeah, I just want to say that Dave and I got the orange memo, and I think Mike didn't get the memo. So we're very coordinated today.
sorry,
So
I didn't check my email before this. Like, my
there
apologies.
you go. Sorry. So I wanted to kind of take a step back and really explain to people, and I really appreciate everybody's sharing their personal journeys, because that's what it is. We are all individuals, and we all should be treated personally, individually, and not like one size fits all medicine and wellness. That's how we treat it today. And focusing on the root cause of something instead of addressing with a pill or a shot. So I just want to say, I always focused on, we started with the endocannabinoid system. That was my goal, because I was noticing, I was a dispensary owner at the time. I had 5 different dispensaries under the same brand in Southern California. And I was noticing that people would consume the same chemical variety and have a completely different experience. And the first thing I did, I focused on the plant genomics. So doing genetic sequencing of the plant, we name this plant different names, but it really doesn't mean anything. It's what the components of the plant are that you're putting in your body. So once I started realizing that, I started looking at the human genetic side and merging those two together, not to find, what is the ultimate plant. It's to help people avoid or mitigate possible adverse events. So now your DNA is your personalized roadmap. So this is your human GPS system. It shows you where your own personal potholes are in your road. Where is there your own personal traffic jam? So if you're aware of this, it's empowering, because you can then create lifestyle modifications to be able to avoid those possible personal potholes along the way. So the way that it works is, it's a saliva-based test. You swab into your cheek, you register because we're HIPAA, we're GDPR compliant, it's medical data. You send it over to our lab. We'll sequence that and genotype that and provide you a report. So like I said, it's focusing on your endocannabinoid system first, but now we expanded the whole genome and we're providing precision wellness and precision therapeutic suggestions across the board. So we have for women, female hormone health. So looking at predisposition to menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, extremely helpful to women who have a predisposition to something that they can actually turn off that genetic expression by taking certain things in advance. Also, it helps their significant others because we had a lot of calls from husbands and boyfriends saying, thanks, you saved my marriage because I don't have to deal with my wife going through certain, genetic challenges based on her menopause. So we have male hormone health. We have nutrigenomics, so personalized supplements and vitamins, etc., skin, etc., even canine for dogs. But the concept is you bookend the experience, starting with DNA, giving you a suggestion, then being able to have a feedback loop on how is that working for the individual, and using AI to be able to start creating predictive inferences. So the next person that comes into a healthcare professional's office, you can say, you know what, there was 100 people that were similar to your genetics that took this protocol and showed that it was efficacious, that it worked for them. And that's the way, you're really building personalized precision health and wellness in medicine.
Understood. Thank you for sharing this. Yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah, exactly.
We talk about, I don't want to step on anybody's toes because you're moderating this, but you talk about, addiction, you talk about mental health and all these things. Well, I just want to make a couple of statements. Number one, there's a very large percentage of human beings that have a treatment resistant gene. So we have these, antidepressant, anti-anxiety medications. We go to a psychopharmacologist, they look at us, they diagnose us, and they say, all right, here's your medication, here's your SSRI, etc. Well, guess what? Maybe close to 30% of the population has a predisposition to treatment resistance. So they're going to get their pill. It's not going to work for them, but they'll get all the side effects from that. So why are we not making that standard practice to be able to do that? Additionally, we work with a lot of pain management specialists, and there's 1/4 of the population has a predisposition to opioid dependence. So we're giving people opioids without understanding that by giving them the opioid, you can actually turn on the expression of the genetic predisposition and get them to be dependent. Not everybody, but if there's 4 of us on this, if we all take an oxy, one of us may actually get triggered that dependence gene. So these are the things that we have to be extremely aware of as us as patients or as humans, and working with our healthcare professionals. It has to be a more of a collaborative kind of approach to health and wellness.
Understood. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, so I'll come to Michael again. So for the power of solitude, if you can describe the impact of it, and also like disconnecting from the stress of the everyday life on your mental health. So if you can share, and also like how can others incorporate this into their own lives?
So when you bring up the word disconnection, I have a very, very strong relationship with that word because it's a trait that I have, and I really rely on the idea of disconnecting, and it brought me into the wilderness. Is something we all can do. Now, part of that we all face is like this fear of sitting alone with ourselves. We bring the mindful aspect of that out here with you. It almost makes it a little bit more comfortable because you're relying on the power of observation, which is something that we all utilize in our everyday life. And you're able to observe the animals, the plants, the trees, and the way that they move. And what it does for me, and what I like to point out to people that I work with, is it gives you an opportunity to step away from that story of self-suffering that we all tell ourselves, that we all caught up in because it's easy, and just watch the environment, watch how things move and how they interact with each other. You can build a new story around what you're seeing to counteract the story that's holding you back. So it helps you to bring this ability to sit with yourself and connect emotionally inside while engaging the living world around you and removing that disconnect to build a new narrative and a new story that helps you to get and achieve the goals in it. I think it really builds on the clinical aspect of things because we essentially work hand in hand. And whether we're in the clinic or in the outdoor setting, we're still working with that collaborative effort, collaborating with the person that's guiding us one way or the other, or the environment around us. But it all comes back to the fact that we got to believe. We got to believe that the steps and the effort that we're putting into whatever avenue we're pursuing is going to achieve that goal. We talk about the medications and this and that. Well, if we rely solely on somebody to give us an answer, it's not going to be a long-term fix. So by bringing these mindful practices in to a nature background, peaceful tranquility setting like this, you're able to speak and listen to that voice of hope that is inside of you.
Okay, got it. Understood. So, okay, I'll come to Dev. What was the turning point that shifted your control over the bipolar disorder? And how do you guide others to find their own moments of the transformation through the stand-up comedy?
For me, manic depression, bipolar disorder is cyclical. So I would go into depressive episodes. And as I got older, the depression, the episodes got deeper and deeper, darker and darker, and lasted longer. And the same thing with the mania. The flight among the clouds, I'd get higher. I'd think I was the smartest person in the room. And, oftentimes I was an asshole without planning it, without knowing it. It's just how it came out. And so I think what I hear too from Len and Mike is, for me, taking quiet time. I don't necessarily call it meditation, because meditation for me means I've got to get somewhere to that quiet place where I really don't have any thoughts, or they're minimal. And with bipolar disorder, the anxiety is constant. It's always there, and our minds are racing, and loops of negative thoughts that are constant. And so the quiet time gave some reprieve for that. And what would happen would be the things that were important would just bubble up in my head. And I knew, maybe it's 2 things or 3 things. But oftentimes, one thing, if I could accomplish one thing, that was success. And I found I was making lists of things to do, the things that I wanted to do, things that needed to be done. And I could, it was overwhelming, and created anxiety and worsened the depression or the mania. And when I started making lists of 1 thing or 2 things or 3 things, then I could have success by doing just that 1 thing. And I could mark it off my list and feel good about it. And then that encouraged me to do the other. As far as a turning point, part of it was writing. My blogging, I blog for bphope.com, and my blog posts have been read by over 1 million people. And the most common comment from them was, "OMG, that's me, you're telling my story." And I was writing it when I was writing it, I was actually telling my story, and I was helping other people, but I was also helping myself, and I could see it. So the combination of that, and then being able to start looking for the humor in my experiences, and those were the things that started me in a different direction. Also, I've got to say, medication helped. The medication, you don't get cured from having bipolar disorder, depression, or anxiety, but the medications can make it so the lows aren't quite so low, and they don't last quite so long, and the highs don't go quite so high, and they don't last too long. Uh, but again, the anxiety was the worst, and just getting out of my own head, whatever. I was stuck. We're stuck when we're doing that in our own heads, and we have senses of dread and senses of guilt, and it's just constant. So being able to get out of my head was just, and it was just a little bit at a time, but it was a blessing and helped start to turn things around for me.
Understood. Understood. So
Hey,
Len,
can
I'll
I
come
jump
to
in
you.
there real quick? Because
Yeah,
you said
please,
something
please.
that was very important to me. It was the perception of meditation that you had. It was, you always had to go somewhere. When I got into meditation, I had the same kind of view. As caught in the stigmas of it. Like, you got to shave your head. You got one of those 1998 chant CDs or whatever case may be. And I had a talk therapy session where it was introduced to me. I fought it just like that, just like you were talking about. And then I went out back and I picked up my crossbow and I started shooting, and I realized that all the different things of meditation that are important, the breathing, the slowing your thoughts down, the being able to center yourself, were a part of my enjoyment, my shooting. So then I started to be able to transition that into coming out in the wilderness. But what I'm looking at is the fact that we all, in one form or another, have within our daily practices and our daily routines some form of meditation, which it doesn't necessarily have to go to a certain spot or a certain destination. It's about the journey, the thought process, just like you were talking about writing things down and how you work through them. That's essentially what meditation is about. It's not about chasing a thought or a direction or even technically sitting still. 9 times out of 10, when I'm out in the wilderness with a group, we're walking. We're focusing on walking meditation. It's simply about channeling your thoughts and being able to look at them, to slow down and bring yourself back into the present moment, so that everything else is beaten down on you, all that stress, all that disorder, and just disruptions are not what you're focused on. You're focusing on you and how you can overcome each of those. And it's a staircase essentially in front of you to climb and reach each one of those objectives that you write down on the paper.
Yeah, and if I may, I like what you said. And if I sit down and I'm going to meditate and I have a purpose for that, I'm going to work on this aspect of what's going on in my life. It doesn't work. When I sit down and just be, then again, I calm and the thoughts bubble up, and then that's where I end up headed. Not trying to get somewhere, just allowing my mind to help me discover a pathway, that's right for me.
Absolutely. There's always a unique pathway and a unique, individualized journey. If I was to make any suggestion as to, help you kind of tame that or change that in a different direction at some point, if you were comfortable with it, would be the idea of walking meditation. Just simply go out for a walk and kind of focus in on inside of your breathing and sitting still, the actual movements that you're making, the way that it feels when your foot touches the ground, the way you feel the breeze push against you or it's within your arms and things like that. And ultimately, it's aimed at kind of softening all that tension that you're bringing to the table when you try to sit down. Because to me, I get a feeling that there's a lot of the hamster wheel momentum going on within the thought process. And your hand is your outlet in writing it down. If you added another tool into it by being in this walking meditation, I feel like it may kind of centerize things for you a little bit and kind of help you to ease into some of these ideas that you're trying to work through.
Thanks for that.
Lovely.
Most definitely.
Lovely. Great. So it is a great discussion, I'd say. And I'll quickly come to Len. So Len, like, what according to you? I mean, do the cannabinoids and terpenes interact with the endocannabinoid system? Like, what role do they play in managing the mental health and the wellness?
I'm going to try to see if I can integrate the answer with some of the things that both Dave and Mike said. When I was a kid, I would sit in class and the teacher would call me. My brain, I would have different thoughts. So I was the daydreaming kind of kid. And at some point, I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, which I had never thought it was a disorder. I always thought it was my superpower, but they labeled it a disorder. So as Dave said, for some people, medication works. For other people, it doesn't work as well. You got to find the right one. So I was put on prescription medication. I can't say it didn't work. The goal of it was to help me focus, which it did, but it removed my connection to self. So I had no connection to my emotional sense. And by meeting some older kids, they asked me if I wanted to smoke a cigarette. They actually try to, fool me and put cannabis in the cigarette. So I had an experience with cannabis. I went back to class, and the windows that were open in my head narrowed, and I could focus. I never said anything to anybody because cannabis wasn't really supposed to be medicine. It's a drug, at that time. But for me, it became my medicine. So I got off the prescription medications, and I'm not advocating this for anybody. This is my experience. And, and I can relate to what Dave was saying about your mind is trying to escape on many different things. There's all these thoughts because I have this ADD. And, meditation for me, took so many different classes. I took transcendental meditation, all those things. But as Mike was saying, the best time that I quote unquote meditate is when I hike in nature and I stop thinking and I just be, and all those kind of things start flowing in, and your mind gets clarity. You become a vessel for things to start downloading to you. And now your ideas are much more clear. So there's different ways to meditate. I agree with Mike, and nature's a huge help with that. But so to go back to answer your question about mental health and anxiety and all that stuff, I think it's important for us to establish what the endocannabinoid system really is and how it works, and then how cannabis sort of interacts with that. So we discovered this system in 1992. It wasn't that long ago, and it evolved with us. There's a lot of things in our bodies that, through evolution, we no longer use and need, but this system evolved with us. So the main goal of the endocannabinoid system is to maintain balance or homeostasis. The way that it does this, it gets signals from the other systems, like your immune system, your endocrine system, etc. It sends it up the central nervous system, sort of like salmon swimming upstream to your brain. And your brain makes a decision which neurochemicals to be able to secrete to get that system back in balance. So the two that are endogenous, means we create those ourselves, part of the endocannabinoid system, are called anandamide. And the word, and the second one is 2-AG. So the word ananda means bliss in Sanskrit. So this is your bliss molecule. This is what's secreted. This is when we run and we get the runner's high. This is one of the chemicals that we produce that gets made. So when we consume cannabis, the two main cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, means the plant is delivering that. Is called THC, delta 9 THC, and CBD, cannabidiol, CBD. So when the plant grows and you remove that bud from the plant, it has an acid molecule to it. When you heat it, it's called decarboxylation. It drops the acid molecule and it binds to our receptors that are in our body. So we have CB1 receptors. They're mostly located in our brain and central nervous system. When we consume THC, it binds to your CB1 receptor and releases anandamide. So that's the way the drug works. When we consume CBD, it has an affinity for the CB2 receptors, which are mostly located in our immune, our digestive system, or body, and it releases 2-AG. So those are the two chemicals, neurochemicals, that are released that a ligand, which is cannabis, helps to secrete. Now, going back and answering your question about mental health, etc. So let's say I'll use Mike as an example, but he seems to be a guy that doesn't get rattled really fast, but I'll use him as an example anyway. So Mike is walking down the street and a car flies out of almost nowhere and almost hits him. And he's going to have a fight or flight experience. So some of the things that are going to happen is you're going to have a secretion of neurochemicals, dopamine, adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol. Now, when he realizes, his mind realizes it's safe, there's no lion chasing you in the jungle, there's two things that happen. There's a reuptake of those neurochemicals, and then your brain releases new neurochemicals to get you back to balance and homeostasis. And those are anandamide and 2-AG. So your genetics, how they would play a role in that. Let's say that Mike has a predisposition to stress reactivity. And I know that Dave does this, so I didn't want to use him as an example because he already is diagnosed. Let's say he has a predisposition to stress reactivity. It's a gene called FAAH, fatty acid amide hydrolase. Very, very important gene, but we may not know because it breaks down anandamide, which is that endogenous endocannabinoid. So if he's breaking down anandamide at a very rapid pace compared to the average person, that cortisol that's in his bloodstream can stay longer. And if the cortisol is staying longer in his bloodstream, there's several things that can happen. Number one, it can lower his pH level, make him more acidic. Your immune system can then over-respond to that and create inflammation. So what you may feel is inflammation in your knees, anywhere in your joints, knees, hips, elbows, neck, back, etc. If he has predisposition to gut health issues, it can actually turn on the expression of IBD or other gut health challenges. The good news is by understanding this, you can subsidize what you're naturally deficient in. So maybe take some THC, it'll bind to that receptor, and it'll actually squirt more anandamide. On the flip side, if you take a little bit too much THC, it does the opposite. It can actually trigger the stress reactivity, make people feel more anxious. And then if he has a gene for PTSD, now it can replay that over and over and over. And instead of having a therapeutic benefit, you're actually creating an adverse event. So being able to know this about yourself and take the right amount. So a suggestion would be maybe take higher CBD, less THC. And then to answer your other question, terpenes are essential oils that the plants produce. Every plant produces essential oils in nature. In cannabis, there's two things. The terpenes give it its smell and also have an effect. So if you're prone to stress reactivity, you may want a terpene profile first that is calming. So something like linalool, which is also found in lavender, is a calming terpene. The second one may be beta-caryophyllene, which is found in clove and black pepper, and also in some cannabis varieties. And that is an anti-inflammatory, works very well with CBD to reduce the inflammation. So as you're using THCs as an analgesic to reduce the pain, you have your sort of formulation that is geared directly to you, and then you can find the products that are more identified to you. Two other things really, really quick. This one is metabolic function, dosing. How you dose anything is really important because how you metabolize things are different. The doctor tells you take 2 of these. Well, why am I taking 2? Why am I not taking 4? Why is Mike not taking 1? He may be a slow metabolizer. So understanding how to dose correctly is really important. And the last thing is interactions. So if we're taking phytocannabinoids and we're also taking an SSRI, like Dave is taking medication, there could be an interaction because that medication uses the same enzymatic pathway. One of them can be an inducer, one can be an inhibitor. So you got to look at all these different things to be able to guide people to a more personalized experience with anything, and especially, phytocannabinoids like THC and CBD.
Wow, great way of explaining. Yeah, thank you so much, Shil, and that's really helpful. Yeah.
Sure.
So, before we wrap, so I'll quickly introduce. I mean, not introduce. I mean, quickly want to ask one advice for the listeners. What would it be? So, anyone want to start?
I'll start. I think a couple things is when we are in that anxiety state or that depressive state, we're oftentimes unable to move or do things and go out and interact with people. And I know for me, when that was happening, I'd ended up going to the mailbox at night, so I didn't see anybody. But I think seeing, and knowing that these things are going on and having a plan for if we're going to be out and interacting with people, have a plan for what are some topics to talk about, and also to make sure that we don't just vomit everything about our personal self. That is, it's important to us, and that's what's happening with us. But it's off-putting to somebody else. So there's two things. Smile, ask, and listen. And when we smile and say in our mind that about the person we're talking to, if we say, I love you or I like you, our eyes brighten and a smile comes to our face. And then we ask a question and listen carefully. And that makes a huge difference. And then the other one is an acronym that I talk to the folks I work with mental illness. And the acronym is WAIT, WAIT, and it stands for Why Am I Talking? And knowing why you're talking is good, because oftentimes when we're talking, we're talking about ourselves. And once we're talking about ourselves, we're still in our head. We're seeking acceptance. We're trying to be okay and show people are okay. We're pretending, and we don't have to pretend. If we smile, ask, and listen, and if we have an idea when we're going into an event, some of the questions we're going to be asking, and we're prepared, then that helps us, again, get out of our head and be aware of the surroundings. And people like to talk about themselves. So the more we ask and the more we listen, the more people like us. We can go home and instead of saying, I wish I hadn't said that, I'm embarrassed about saying this, we can go home feeling good that we talked to somebody, we learned from somebody, and that gives us peace of mind. And peace of mind is everything when you're living with depression, anxiety, and mania. Peace of mind is everything, whether you get it from walking meditation or one of my favorite things to do is go to Oregon wine country and sit on the deck and overlook the vineyards and have a small glass of wine, and my mind just, just goes, and
Alright.
it's amazing.
Lovely. Great. Thank you. So Mike, you want to share?
So I think actually I would probably start by raising a very, very valid question that comes to mind. Why are we repressing or fighting who we are instead of learning to embrace, befriend, and grow the experience of who we are? Because, all three of us come from much different backgrounds, but all three of us are on the exact same mission. What makes that mission look and feel and sound different is the labels and the terminology. If any one of us connected on the street somewhere and we started up conversation, that conversation would flow great. But because we're in this arena right now, we're having these little bit of hiccups back and forth because those stigmas, they are what we stick that fear behind. So if we take time to not only learn about ourselves and embrace ourselves, find that voice, and then open our ears and allow the person next to us to do the same, we would answer so many more questions so much quicker, and we would provide so much great help for the people that we're trying to serve. Because I've seen ideas, I've heard points and thoughts in this conversation that I've never thought of from that perspective. That now when I take back and apply them to the stories I have, it opens up a whole new door. I'm sitting here at a campfire right now sharing stories and ideas that may sound completely different to somebody else, but when they apply them to the context of the world they live in, it still provides that same motivation. And I think whether it's in the arena of trying to help someone or just in our own personal lives, removing those labels, realizing that we all have a place within the circle that is even, is the step that needs to be taken.
Okay. Okay. So Len.
Well, I have to agree with my colleagues on here. And Mike said something really profound. Knowing yourself is key. And 99.9% of our genetics is the same. We are all the same. It's that 0.1% that really makes us different. And once we understand those nuances, we can connect with love and kindness with our fellow human on a path that is similar instead of focusing on that 0.1% that makes us different. When we're looking to treat ourselves health and wellness wise, we have to understand that that 0.1% nuance is also what can make us different in terms of treatment. So we're not going to be treated exactly the same way all the time with our health and wellness, whether it's mental or physical health. So the thing that I want to express to people is really learn yourself as much as possible. Do as much diagnostic work on yourself as possible. Look at your genetics, look at your epigenetic expression, look at your gut microbiome, understand all these things, and then actually treat yourself first with love and kindness. Understand that you may have these predispositions, but you are empowered to actually make lifestyle changes according to that. And it's not a sentence. Just because you have something genetically predisposed to, it doesn't mean that you're not empowered to make changes. But the more you learn about yourself, the better you can collaborate with people, your healthcare professionals, and yourself. Love and kindness.
Exactly. Lovely. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Healthy Waves. And I hope that, dear listeners, like our discussions today have provided you with the valuable insights and the inspiration to harness the power of your mind in overcoming the addiction, trauma, chronic illness. So, and definitely a huge thank you to our amazing guests, Dave, Mike, Len, for sharing their stories and the expertise with us. And for the listeners, I'd love to mention, like, always remember that no matter how the tough journey is, there is always a hope, and there is a way to find light in the darkness. So Stay tuned for more expert discussions on our next episode. And until then, take care and stay healthy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Avik.
Thank you.